We need to get you these guys.
Yeah, I don't have one.
Swag.
Yes. We'll be in contact. We'll be in contact with the show. Depending on your performance.
Yeah, exactly.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it might be, wherever it is that you are. Today we've got some fun guests. I'm John. This is Christos. This is sort of Christos. It's Christos from the Upside Down world, where his computer broke and he reinstalled a Linux desktop, so he's only got 8 fonts available from 1997, and one of those happens to be Comic Sans. So while I am going to go and try to eye bleach
Have a fit.
my eyes. He's going to tell us about some news. So, so Christos, I guess, oh, God, talk about the news. Jesus, that font's killing me.
This is the best way to troll JP on a Friday morning. And that's a response to his comments on my design skills. Obviously, this was something I put quickly together, so there was no preparation work. That's what happened in 10 minutes, but that's what happens when you comment. You get Comic Sans. Anyway, we are starting with a new segment. Welcome everyone. Happy time zone for everyone. We have some fantastic guests later on about Graph. But before we do that, we have some news from the division, from Microsoft, and from around the world. So we'll start the December release of Azure AD. There's a whole slew of features and preview items that came out. Azure AD phone sign up, pretty cool. You don't have to use your email anymore. Security defaults for all tenants by default. 250,000 members in Azure AD Connect for group support. It's crazy. Federated apps now are available in Azure AD. Application gallery and Finder you can navigate teams directly from my access portal is pretty cool. I have a question. How many here use QR codes? Because apparently JP says they're not a thing. But I think they're a thing. You can now scan the QR code on your screen and go straight to the URL. You don't have to worry about URL. JP's is like, man, this is going downhill. We started well and it's down. Anyway. Let us know if you'd like the.
If we keep up the theme, then maybe next we can talk about ways to optimize your 56K modem for accessing links behind QR codes. Maybe you could use your flip phone to scan it. You have like a Moto Razr that you can use for scanning that QR code. So
I don't know. The oldest phone I own is probably 5 years old. That's their iPhone.
Sadly, I'm looking.
I've got a Windows phone.
My phone has a thing that says, it actually has a button that says scan QR code. Let's see what it says. Let's see what's in the QR code. Set up, sign in with Azure. Oh, okay. So it says what's on the screen. Good. I'm glad I opened that on my phone.
Are you saying that it doesn't open the link?
No, it just opens the text.
For real?
Yes.
I haven't tested my QR code. There you go. Failure. Okay. QR designer. I wrote is broken. Hey, Robert Wilson is saying that my audio is echoing. Like I'm in a monster truck rally. What have you done with my audio, JP?
I've done nothing.
He controls everything. So I think it's. Is it still echoing?
Well, how about that? Is that better?
I
think it's fixed now.
Okay, cool. I can't believe that the QR codes, I spent so much time doing them and they're awful. Anyway, check this out. You can actually sign in people from a different B2C tenant in your current B2C tenant, which is crazy, but it's now doable. So there's a link somewhere that allows you to do that if you Google for it. Don't use the broken QR code. It's comedy hour at the 45 show today. Right, next one is Logic Apps now support managed identity for Azure AD OAuth-based connectors, which is brilliant. It means that you don't have to configure credentials or set up encrypted credentials for these connectors. You can go directly with managed identity, which I find brilliant. And you can set it up. The next one is the fact that the Azure PowerShell 5.4 release came out. It has a large number of fixes and new features. There was a large focus on networking on this release, so go and check out the release notes. I think Azure PowerShell is adding more and more API surface to allow you to do some brilliant things with Azure. So if you're a PowerShell fan, then go and check out this release. Then upcoming events. There's a VS Code live event that you can sign up. These are all free, by the way, so make sure to sign up and learn how you can get started with VS Code and pick up some advanced skills. There's a climate hackathon, which will allow you to join forces with some other clever people around the world and help progress climate and how we can fix it. And the last one is addressed to your kiddos, probably, because it's more about not STEM, but STEM. That's a typo. There's a new STEM program in collaboration between Microsoft, Minecraft, and Adobe Spark. So you can actually code stuff and try to create sustainable living environments around Earth. So you can design them and run them on a website, and there's all these things that you can do. And it's addressed, or the target is from 8 years old to 16. So if you have kids that are interested in doing stuff with Minecraft and building things with Adobe, make sure you sign up and have some fun. And these are my news for the day, with my awful fonts and my awful design skills.
Yeah, that was it's fun. And we'll have a blog post out later with links to all these things. So you can find that at aka.ms/45show.
Or you can use the QR
blog. Or you can use the QR codes if you'd like to know the title of the titles of the slides.
God, this is what I had to go through.
Yeah, so a few of the things that are going on this week. So the B2C authorization thing, we're gonna be getting back into that probably here in the next week, few days, whatever. I'll be really curious to see. I know we got some comments on Twitter from Sahil and a few other people around ways to take in data from existing Azure AD and push that in too. So we're gonna make sure that gets covered so that we can sort of get back to that delegated authorization thing. Mm-hmm. We're also going to be moving the show again to Tuesdays. So starting next week, we will no longer be on Monday mornings. We will be on Tuesday mornings, Tuesdays and Fridays. So the same time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, but we're going to be on Tuesday morning instead, mostly because Mondays are Mondays and they're miserable, and nobody wants to do anything on Monday, much less have to put on a happy face in front of a bunch of people. So we're going to move on Tuesday. And today we've got a couple folks from the Graph team. And I'm sorry, Bolt, I know you don't like change. I don't like change either. But I'll tell you what. You know what I really didn't like? I didn't like doing a show on Friday, doing a show on Monday, and doing a show on Tuesday because it meant that everything had to be done by Thursday. And let me tell you, who's not good at getting things done early.
Thanks for the kind comments. Like Bolt saying, you cheer us up on Monday morning. I know. You can watch the recordings. How about that? We have a YouTube channel.
You can always come and hang with us in the. Discord.
Yes. On Discord, yes.
Yep. So we've got a Discord. You come hang out. We were just talking to Bolt yesterday about, telemetry and tracing in B2C and how to capture business events as people sign in and stuff. So there's usually some pretty interesting conversation going on. So the link's out there in the chat. Be sure to come and join it.
Should that be Discord/join?
That would work too, but yeah. The Discord takes you straight to the Discord. There's also a join link that will take you to join said Discord. So, anyway, so what are we doing today? Who do we have today?
Today we have our fantastic folks from the Graph team. We have been working with them on and off in different things, but this is the first time that we're actually collaborating live on the stream, which is great. And we have Brian Jacket and we got Sebastien Levert. They're both PMs for the team. And today they're here to do a nice introduction to Graph and all the different tools that you can use. We also have some announcements. And going forward, we'll be seeing more of this team because we'll be doing a more regular kind of a segment on the show where they will be coming to talk about latest releases and what's coming and what have you, and also answer your questions. So, morning, Brian. Morning, Sebastien. You got their handles the other way around, JP. I love it.
What?
Their Twitter handles are the other way around.
No,
they're the
good.
other way around.
They're good.
No, they're not.
They're all
I see it right on my screen.
Yeah, Sebastien and Brian.
Yeah.
Sebastian plays the drums. I remember that because we talked a few weeks ago, and I play the drums too. And I was like, "Nice, another guy who plays the drums who works here," which was awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we can play music live.
Yeah, we should actually do a band. Let's start with the band.
Yeah, I'll get my Guitar Hero equipment out and we can rock along.
There we go. Well, you know, if we were to do it like let's say it's like a B2C band, then what we would do is we'd take the drums and completely disassemble them. We would scatter them across a 400-acre field, and then we would strap rockets to drumsticks and see how we could make music. I think it'd be fantastic. We should do that.
Yeah, that sounds like a brilliant idea.
Can I join? The only thing I can play is the recorder. So, is there a band position for a recorder player?
You'll be socially distanced over in the left field.
Yeah, we need
outside
dancers.
the frame, somewhere on the side, outside the frame.
I can't hear your mic. You're not. I don't know. It's not working.
Fine.
So Sebastian, I guess we'll start with you because you're on the left. So you're the first one in a left to right motion. So what do you do here?
So I'm a PM on the Graph team, mainly focusing on customer and partner experience. So we are kind of the face. We're kind of the face of Graph. So Graph is a very complex API from hundreds of teams at Microsoft, and we're kind of the team that represents all of these teams from a partner and customer standpoint. So we talk with internal partners, external partners, some of our customers, and basically we help them on board to Graph. We make sure their voice is being heard, and we have fun hacking around with Graph, and that's what we're going to do today. I want to hack and code a little bit, not just talk. I don't have the opportunity that much to show off my my chops in coding. You're gonna see how bad they are. So that's what I want to do. Want to do today. But yeah, that's what I do. And Brian is also part of my team. I'm the newbie here. Joined a couple of months ago. Brian has been at Microsoft I think for the last 75 years.
Because Microsoft as a whole has been around for 40 years. So
yeah.
Exactly.
You're one of the founding members of Microsoft. It's nice to have you here, sir.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'm Brian T. Jackett. I am one of the first members of the Microsoft Graph Customer and Partner Experience team. We just formed last May, and we're growing our team out. Sebastian mentioned, we're kind of the voice of the customer and partner, trying to bring any kind of the feature requests that we hear, any pain points, but also being able to kind of share, useful scenarios that we're seeing, or be able to kind of highlight samples, innovative things that we're seeing our customers and partners building. We really love to highlight all those awesome stories that people are sharing with us, and really kind of showcase the great things that are going on Microsoft Graph, and also the additional platforms, again, like Microsoft Identity and Azure and beyond. So lots of great things that are happening that we really want to call out.
So I think the first question then, and I'm sure you get this all the time, what is the graph? What? Let me be more specific. What can I do with the graph? What's the point? What is the point of Graph's existence? How is it useful to me as a developer?
Sure, I can take a quick step at that one. So Microsoft Graph is really the API for anything related to Microsoft 365. And so if I, as a user, I've got emails, I've got tasks, I've got events that I have, I've got files, I've got lots of different kind of data points that relate to me as a user inside of Microsoft 365. And in order to access that, in the past, we had dozens of different APIs. So one specifically for email, one specifically for files, one specifically for your identity. And really, it was just this loose collection of all these different SDKs, different code bases, different authentication. And really, the idea with Microsoft Graph is to unify all that together. So now if I want to go and access, again, my mail, my identity user, my contacts, anything else, it's all through one API. So we share same code, same authentication, same consistent model for how you go and access that. And really gave developers and the users are going to be consuming this one way to go and access all that data.
So instead of me having to know how to access how to use the SharePoint API and the identity APIs and all that sort of stuff, I just have one surface, right?
Exactly.
And even on top of that, it's not just that you have one surface, but just think about couple of years back when you had to basically learn authentication for all of these different platforms. Now you authenticate once and you get access to all the workloads, which is kind of a life-changing event for a developer when they have to stop authenticating to all of these different platforms. And thanks to Graph, you basically now have to do one call, you get your token, and you're good to go for basically anything you want to do with your productivity data in M365 and even a little bit more.
I remember having to do OneDrive integration with a mobile app I was building, and oh my god, like that was a whole pain in the backside just to get implemented. And I redid it maybe 4 months ago using the Graph API, and it was it was a night and day experience between having to do and learn all the, I think it was like the OneDrive SDK, I can't remember what it was called, Live SDK back then, and doing it with Graph, and it was absolutely brilliant how little effort it took to get that working. And I'm pretty sure that it's everything else like SharePoint and other things, but from my personal experience, I love working with Graph these days.
So it is definitely a fun tool.
I'm a little curious, and stop me if you can't tell us, but I've always been curious. So Graph itself it's sort of a gateway, right? I mean, ultimately Graph isn't storing any of this data directly, right? I mean, this is all sort of independent services and whatever. You're sort of you're the front end, right? Like you're in extremely banal, simple terms, you're sort of like the API gateway, right?
Yeah, that's
exactly. So, yeah, as I say, underneath the covers, we support 60 plus different workloads. So again, we kind of mentioned a few of those. You got things like Azure AD, Microsoft Identity, we've got SharePoint, we've got Exchange, we've got Planner, we've got To-Do, and the list goes on and on and on. But really, we are kind of that front door. So instead of having to know, like, what are all those individual endpoints I need to call into? What are all the different, authentication handshakes, all the other different kind of ways to call into it? Instead, it is just that graph.microsoft.com. That is that, gateway. And then we, on our end, we parse out and say, oh, you're calling into Teams, you're calling into Exchange, you're calling into whichever service. And so we handle all that kind of, proxying and delegation to the underlying services. So essentially, basically put that gateway in front of everything else that you might be called into.
And I think we also add one level that is above just accessing a specific workload data. We actually establish some connections between the workload, especially when we tag in the user. A user that has a task and a user that has a file are basically the same user, but in two very, very different systems. But with Graph, there's actually a way to traverse Graph and to go from one workload to the other workload and kind of really, really have fun. So while we are one proxy or one gateway to all our APIs, we also kind of enrich that data to make sure that it basically creates and pun intended here, a graph of data. And that's really where we're sitting, and that's the richness of what Graph actually offers in the end.
So on that topic, right? Like, because you're building a brand new API surface, so you kind of can make you can draw those parallels and start to link entities together that otherwise wouldn't be together. So if I'm, say, a business, like, do I have any facility to maybe even push my own entities into Graph or somehow like proxy things back, like so I can kind of get any of that type of the benefit of being a Graph fronted thing?
Absolutely. I'm going to let Brian on that one. It's kind of one of Brian's special powers to know about all of that, bringing my data into Graph.
Sure. There's actually a couple of different facilities for that. Just by itself, Graph lets you go and access the backend data in Microsoft 365. We do have an extensibility story, though, and that can either be a kind of openly typed item or could be a structured set of schema addition that you want to add on to that. So if anyone's familiar with like Microsoft Identity, in Azure AD, there are ways to do kind of like what they call schema extensions. So, hey, I want to be able to push in custom attributes or things like that. In a similar kind of fashion, Graph supports a similar concept. So again, if you want to have kind of loosely typed things, you could do what we call an open extension. And so that's hey, I want to tag this entity, this object, this resource in the back end. I want to add in this key value pairs as additional things that are going to be associated with that. And then separate from that, there's also what we call schema extensions. So if the entity supports it, you actually could extend it and say, hey, when I'm going and accessing my mailbox, when I'm going and accessing, let's say, a file or something, I also want to pop in these additional attributes that are going to go with that. So we do offer a kind of a limited facility for doing things like that. And we have some documentation on that. I'll bring that up and put that into the chat window here so folks can take a look if they're interested.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because I'm familiar with the Active Directory schema extensions we used to have on-prem, and then of course the open extensions we have now and schema extensions we have in Azure AD. But I didn't know that those were also available for other object types. So if the object type supports it, then we could put custom metadata on a file, for example, tag data, metadata, whatever, right? We can do that. That's super, super, super cool.
Absolutely, and maybe one more way is to actually bring your data and being part of the experience of what Graph can offer, especially from a search perspective with our search endpoints. Well, there's Graph connectors. You can actually bring data to Graph and bring your enterprise data back in there. So using our search connectors and all of that. So there we have a bunch of existing connectors already in there. So you can actually bring your own data as part of Graph and just to enrich our existing data, but to really broaden that to a lot larger than what we have right now, which is insanely cool because you can utilize any of our AI or search capabilities to search for your own entities using any of the search areas we have, like Windows search, Bing search, or whatsoever. So bring your data and you're going to be able to find it as part of your M365 experience.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because I imagine too, things like Power Apps and Microsoft Flow and all of the sort of, I don't know the right term, citizen developer, I think was one that people used to use. I mean, I don't know.
Fusion
Gartner
developer these days.
Gartner
is that the new term? Fusion?
Fusion.
Yeah. Fusion.
Oh, okay. I've not heard that. I've heard low code, no code. I've heard
citizen dev. I'm ahead.
Yeah, you are, guys. Man. I'm an old man now. Jeez, my gray hair and my beard's starting to show.
Well, after 75 years at Microsoft, I mean, it's
I guess because last time I looked at platform services in Gartner, I think they just create them just so they can create new reports and charge a fortune for them. So if it's not citizen, it's Fusion. Anyway, okay, so Fusion developers, essentially, let's just call it what they are, right? Power users, people who don't necessarily want to write code as their primary job, but they design apps, they do amazing things with Excel, and they use code and they use automation as a way to be really good at their actual jobs, because their actual job is not producing code. Their actual job is producing actual business value. Not that developers don't produce business value, but their job is producing business value in more tangible ways. So things like Graph and Flow and Power Apps and stuff. I mean, I imagine those are pretty much first-class citizen consumers of Graph too, right?
Parts of them, yeah. So a lot of the connectors that are built in Flow or Power Apps are actually calling Graph directly, and that's, well, now the more we see it, the more even our own experiences that we provide at Microsoft are actually powered by Graph directly. So we tend to want to have our workloads to use Graph as their experience and not go to that super private endpoint that exists, because if it's good for the product, then it's good for the third-party developer, and then it creates a great experience for everybody. So yes, these Flow, Power Apps, anything that connects to let's call it enterprise data or productivity data that exists in Microsoft. Well, there's a lot of that is powered by Graph under the cover, definitely.
All right, I've got one more question, and then I'll stop holding up your demos and stuff. Okay, So I get this question all the time, and I feel like I have a decent answer to it, but is there any point at which we're going to see Azure resources available via Graph, or any sort of the Azure management stuff available via Graph?
Silence.
Or is that a terrible idea, and there's a reason it's a terrible idea that you're going to tell us?
That's a good question, and Brian, I'm going to go with a short answer. If you want to add on top of it, happy to to complement. Probably way more intelligent than I am. But today we have some areas from the Azure side, or from the Azure resources that actually exist in Graph, namely like a lot of people are using like Azure CLI and these kind of things to, for example, create apps, to create like app registrations and everything, and that is part of Graph as of today. So it kind of connects over there. From a larger resource standpoint, I don't know how, like, if there's any work happening or if there's any thoughts on that, Brian.
Yeah, so I will say, just from a kind of organizational standpoint, if you look at Microsoft, we're a very large company, and so there's different kind of pillars of who reports up through who. So in one sense, Azure is a completely different organization compared to where like Office 365, Windows, and other areas are situated. But that being said, what Microsoft Graph started as was literally a small slice of the pie of like, hey, it's Exchange APIs, it's SharePoint, it's like 2 or 3 other things. And over time, that has expanded, and we're starting to grow into more and more services that we're incorporating with this. And within the last, I'd say probably a year or so, the team who's actually, the architects and the folks behind the scenes building Microsoft Graph and, organizing all the APIs, we've actually had a lot more partnership with like the Azure CLI team, the Azure SDK team, the Azure Identity folks. And we've actually been partnering together on a lot of different efforts. So what you're going to see happening is like when it comes time for authenticating to those various different tools, whether it's Microsoft Graph PowerShell or Azure CLI or our SDKs and whatnot, we're really trying to align our stories so that, hey, when I want to use one tool, I can now actually go and use the other tool without having to rewrite my code, without having to redo my authentication middleware or whatever else. And so we're definitely starting to bring together like that better together story of, hey, how can we work together better? Now, will we see that, hey, I can actually go and access my ARM templates and my Azure resources and everything else on Microsoft Graph? I don't know that we're going to get there, anytime in the foreseeable future. But definitely there's much more collaboration and much more coming together on, hey, how are we building things? What tool sets are we using to actually generate our SDKs and generate documentation and so forth? So there's definitely more of that, one Microsoft approach to things going on.
Yeah, and I think usually the context that I get the question is usually around things like commerce and billing, and I want to see my subscription bills, and but at the same time there might be things like I want to see tags in my Azure resources and stuff, and or like there is a bit of a difference between the Azure REST API and Graph, because for the most part I go to Graph for almost everything except for Azure stuff. And so I think it's a common question, but that's cool. I look forward to see how that goes. So okay. So who wants to show us something first? Sebastien, you going to start, or Brian? Do you want to jump in and show us some stuff first?
I think I'm going to go first. If you want, Brian, do you want to?
Yeah, go for it, Seb. You should drum up the interest.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Warm up the crowd so Brian can come in. And
I definitely need to figure out a way to get like a MIDI cable here so I can actually play live and have it as an audio source. That's one of my lockdown project right now.
Hey, MIDI cables. Hey, you and Christos can get together and you could do a PowerPoint in Comic Sans all about MIDI, the interface. It's perfect.
Well, that's exciting. Well, yeah, we should, and would be awesome actually. So a couple of things that I wanted to start with. Wanted to give you a little bit of a couple of latest news around Graph, some areas that have improved in the last month or so, and then afterwards do a little bit of a kind of a Graph 101. How can you start playing with it? And here, like it's how a dev can really start right away and like hack his way through Graph. And I think there's a couple of awesome areas that we have in the Graph site. So everything starts with the Graph. In that case, graph.microsoft.com. Automatically, you're going to be redirected to this portal that we have, which is kind of our home base for everything Graph related. From there, you're going to have a couple of news, and I want to start with this. I already highlighted in some tabs here a couple of really cool news. One of the latest announcement we had was to bring the, and let me zoom in a little bit. We're announcing the first public preview of the Microsoft Teams Activity Feed API on Microsoft Graph. So every single API for Teams is actually accessible through Graph. So it is a Graph first product that we have at Microsoft. And now it is possible to publish activity feeds on your left trail of teams where you're going to get, I don't know, this app has done something for you, or there's a, I don't know, an approval waiting for you, or even from your line of business applications, you're building an HR system and the manager receives, hey, your, I don't know, it's time for your evaluation with this employee, but all of that can automatically be pushed in to Microsoft Teams now. So really cool preview. It was a super awaited features for a lot of our partners. So first really cool thing that happened on Graph lately. Second thing is, and this is, I think it is a game-changing thing, but the Microsoft Search Query API is now fully available as part of Microsoft Graph. So it means that now it is possible to use Graph to do extremely complex queries on a lot of the data estate that lives in Microsoft Graph, from emails to files to custom entities that you're bringing in. You can actually query that and really build super powerful search experiences. So amazing capability. If a lot of people that are landing in Graph are actually either new to the Microsoft ecosystem or super old developers that have been working with the real APIs, but now it's kind of bringing all the power of the old APIs and the new APIs all together. So that's really powerful here. Something I'm really proud of, and a big shout out to one of our PM in our team, Elise Yang, that has shipped an amazing toolkit. I'm going to do a demo of that later on, which is our community-led web component library for Microsoft Graph. And when I say web component, I really mean like standard HTML5 web components for whatever the language you want to use in your front end. We now ship, as part of Microsoft Graph, a set of components that you can just inject in a web page and have the full power of Graph automatically available to you. That's amazing. And they done a really great job. One of the things that, I don't know if we have a screenshot. We actually have a screenshot, which is this one here. The power, this is probably the most requested feature when we're talking about like, we want to reuse a component all the time, which is the live person card. So now it's all driven by Graph data, and it's like incredibly powerful, and that's really cool. The team did a really cool job. As we said earlier, Graph is huge. There's a ton of teams that are working on Graph, and there's a lot of changes happening to Graph that are sometimes big changes, new workloads, new APIs, these kind of things. But sometimes there's also like, we added a new property, we changed a property, we're deprecating a property, which is a news, but a little bit less exciting of a news. Well, depends for who. Now we have a brand new changelog as part of Microsoft Graph. So basically, you can use this amazing platform now to, well, first to get only the news about, I don't know, the V1 endpoint or the beta endpoint, or I just want to know about something around identity. Now I'm going to see all the latest changes that happened through this. That's really cool. And as a developer, you can actually just click here on RSS and automatic, well, here, yeah, that's the beauty of RSS and Chrome, but
RSS.
That's amazing. But what is cool is like actually you can get automated reminders of what changed on what you actually care about. So you get an RSS, you could do that, and automatically you get that in your own stuff. So
I will only subscribe if it comes in Comic Sans.
Wait a second.
Well, no,
Can we release it?
We have something here. Oh,
clearly, I mean, clearly
we need to release an Edge extension that shows you whatever you've rendered, but changes the font. Yeah, I think that's totally what we need.
Clearly, we need a QR code for accessing the changelog.
It did not work. I was able to get the comic sans serif.
Ah, look at that.
But it was not sans MS, so I'm sorry about that.
Fine.
I did my best. That's how good I am at
on the fly.
design.
I can see that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just as a side note to QR code, when I click on the Discord channel, the first thing I saw was a QR code. Just as
I am being vindicated here.
just saying.
So Chris, I'll tell you a quick story on that. Actually, I helped run a conference here locally, and we actually have like 2,000 plus people or something. Last year, well, not last year, the last year that we held it, we actually used QR codes for all the sponsors to go and scan badges. So we actually kept track of like, hey, who visited which booths and stuff. So I was like eyeballs deep in QR codes, and I actually went into like study how big do you make them, and what's the pixel density that you use, and how much data can you actually fit into a half-inch by half-inch square and stuff. It is amazing, like the science that goes into creating QR codes and how you size them and how far away your scanner needs to be to accurately get them within a 95% confidence ratio.
Nice.
So
joke
all you want, there is like science stuff behind this.
I know. We need to have a session on QR codes now. Like I definitely want to do that.
The only problem though is you actually have to embed the actual content you want, not the text that you're trying to display.
I'm not like I'm a noob on QR codes. I will admit that. However, similar to QR codes, like barcodes, right? I got my my mind blown a couple of years ago when I found out that barcodes actually, when you scan a barcode, you scan the white space, not the black lines. Did you know that?
Yep.
I did not
because
know
the white reflects back. It's whatever. The scanner shoots a laser out, and it's getting back what it actually receives. The black gets absorbed.
40 years, I lived the lie. 40 years, I lived the lie. I thought like the black lines made a difference. No, it's the white space.
That's amazing. That is
amazing.
Science.
Science is amazing. I love science.
Next week's guest is going to be Bill Nye. Maybe we can get some.
Well, I mean, he'd be the right age to talk about QR codes. That's for sure.
Snap!
I used to work for a place, and we made voting machines. Which I'm almost hesitant not to say this because before too long I'll end up in like a Rudy Giuliani lawsuit. But we had so many different kinds of barcodes that people used on these machines, and it was like you'd have normal barcodes that looked like one you'd expect, and then you'd have QR codes, and then you'd have these things that were sort of kind of like a QR code, but they weren't an actual QR code. They were some other kind of square barcode, and it was just like it's like complexity for the sake of it. So. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Well, I think we're going to just drop everything and just go into the science of QR codes.
Is there a graph endpoint coming that's going to let me auto-generate QR codes?
Feature request.
That would be brilliant.
Feature request.
We could have, I'm going to come back to the Graph Explorer, but we could have like a QR code representing an actual resource.
Let's write it. Let's write it now on the fly. How about that?
we have funny enough, we have a jet. I'm curious if there could be something for doing QR codes.
Oh my god,
that's a good question. Let's follow up on that.
Let's follow up on that next episode, guys. We're building it.
Hackathon project. We're gonna go and test this. Yeah.
Yeah, or next FHL, QR code everything in Graph. The last thing, which is, I'm gonna leave that one to Brian because I think it's a really, really cool thing that we have started in our team, which is our Graph Mailbag blog series. Brian, do you want to do a couple of words on that?
Sure. So one thing that we launched back in November, December of last year is the idea of something called the Microsoft Graph Mailbag. And for this, essentially it's going to be 2 times a month. So it's the 2nd and 4th Tuesday. You can follow along. I'll put the link in here. It'll be aka.ms/MS Graph Mailbag.
No QR code.
No QR code for this one, unfortunately. The idea being that a lot of times as we're working with customers and partners, working with developers, we run into, maybe it's a pain point, maybe it's a really cool solution, something we really want to highlight, or maybe it's even something like in our documentation or other areas that maybe didn't get enough highlight, or things that we want to really show the value of. So we're using this as kind of our interface for, hey, here's cool stories that we're hearing. Here are great things that we want to highlight, things that maybe, little nooks and crannies of Microsoft Graph that just don't get enough attention. So one of our first ones we did was showing Microsoft Graph Explorer, which Seb can talk to here in a couple minutes. But innovative ways to use Graph Explorer that you may not be aware of at first glance. We've got another blog post coming up from one of our cloud developer advocates talking about how you can actually use things like Power Automate to go and do custom connectors talking to Microsoft Graph. So there's lots of cool things that we're seeing people building or things we can use. Oh no, there's a QR code floating into the screen. That's awesome. So again, second and fourth Tuesday of each month, we're looking to publish these out there. And eventually, we'd like to get to the point where, hey, we can actually accept ideas and topics from the community at large. So far, it's been much more of an internal focus thing, just to kind of kick the tires and get things up and ramped up. But as we go forward, we're going to come up with a way to, whether it's some kind of form or survey or a QR code you can send us, and we'll be able to take a look at what those topics are that we can share more about.
Awesome, and that's really cool. There's really good content already, so that's really nice. So now that we know what's new, let's dive into how you can actually start your journey in Graph from a kind of 101 standpoint. Everything happens at the header of that Microsoft Graph site, where there's like all our solutions are getting started. If you want to go and start whatever language you're using, you want to start from the .NET Core standpoint, Angular, React, Node, whatever, you start here, and we're actually going to scaffold a project for you, pre-baked, ready to run, kind of a very good F5 experience, so you can start working with it. So that's a really cool way to do it. But my preferred way to do it is to actually start with something called the Graph Explorer. So think about Graph Explorer as a ready-made portal that you can actually hit on basically any endpoints of Graph. And let me just log out for now. I'm going to just sign out from this account just for a second. I'm going to go back to Graph. And the beauty here is, as a dev, you don't even need to actually have an account or whatsoever. You just need to go in here. And the first thing you're going to see is, for example, in here you have a query to me as a user. So I want to know the details about the currently logged in user. I just hit run query, and automatically I get the data. And I get all of that data right here in its JSON format. So really cool stuff, because you went from a super simple get call and you get data automatically from here. That's based on a sample tenant that we provide. So you can actually go here and get your mail. I want to see what are the messages that lives in that mailbox. And you can actually see all of that. What is super cool about this is, from here, there's actually nothing you have to do. You just go in and you start looking for that. The issue is when you're using the kind of the baked-in user we provide, you can actually just do gets. You cannot create content or edit content. It would be way too funny to go back inside some of that content and see what's underneath and what people would be creating. So what you can do here is to sign in with your own account. We usually recommend to not do that in a production environment. Actually, we absolutely not recommend to do that in a production environment. We have a developer program on Graph where you can actually get a free dev tenant that gives you the full licensing you need to use Graph Explorer. So do that, join now, you're going to automatically get a tenant where you're going to be able to log in. And once you log in, you go here, you select your user, you put in your password, and automatically, well, yes, I want to stay signed in.
So while you're signing in, just an idea here, I wonder if we can have sandboxes for these kind of non-authenticated users, so I can go and play around with put and pats, but the data gets wiped out once I leave the site or something.
Yeah, that could be that could be kind of in a local cache type of put in that could be something interesting. We're gonna it's part of our team, so our team owns that Graph Explorer. I'm gonna make sure that they're aware of that feature request, and it could be or you can go on GitHub and create an issue on their repo, because actually the Graph Explorer is an open source project. You can actually go in there and do that, which is really cool.
Speaking of which, Seb actually submitted a PR back in, was that December or November of last year, to get a change into here, and it's already live. So, and that was before you joined Microsoft.
I was still on the other side. I was like, nice. I want to have that thing in the Explorer. I'm going to show you what it is, because I'm super proud of.
But to your question, Christos, we do have that Microsoft 365 developer program. Actually, Seb, if you hover over the little gear icon in there, you can show them. There's a little Git sandbox tenant link in there as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so there's your link to go over to the thing, so you can actually go and sign up for the program, and then be able to you basically get a 90-day renewable tenant. As long as you keep using it, it'll continue to renew for you, and you even get 25 users in there. And why this to me is like the awesome deal is that, hey, I don't want to be testing with the same global admin account every single time. Maybe I want to have, here's my salesperson, here's my manager, here's my end developer. And so you actually set up like personas, and that's kind of leads into something I'll talk about a little bit later on for browser profiles. But I can actually have different use cases, different personas, and test them out and see, hey, like who's the manager for this user, or what are the mails that I sent to of another user within the tenant. And you can really get to see like those end-to-end almost testing scenarios and actually mock them out using that developer sandbox tenant.
And that kind of removes, a couple of years ago, there was that trend where developers were always saying, it works on my machine. Now it became, it works on my tenant, because you're always working as like your global admin. Organization. So that's really cool. So now I'm logged in, I can hit run query, and now I actually have my own stuff here. None of that. Call me on my mobile phone. That's not, I don't know who you're gonna call, but that's not me.
Ghostbusters.
So that's really cool about Graph, and what is even better is Graph actually gives you access to all the different workloads that we support, from a planner for tasks, SharePoint list, users, people, your mail, your calendar, OneNote, OneDrive, everything. Like basically everything is available as here. And I can go here and say, hey, I want to getting started. I want to get my photo, and now you see my beautiful face being shown up.
Does this cover the full? It doesn't cover the full API surface, right? Because
it does not cover the full API. So it covers, I would say, the top scenarios or some of that. But as this is open source, you can actually go and add your own sample in there and see if that's going to be picked up by the community. So really cool. And Graph is based on our wonderful identity platform. So we are using exactly the same capabilities that Azure AD provides, for example, from a permission standpoint. So here you can actually see all the permissions required. Like, for example, if I go to my OneDrive and all the items in my drive here, I see what are the permissions that are required here and which one I'm already consented to or which one I need to consent to if I'm not already. And you can actually go here and see the access token, as part of JWT automatically. That's the feature that I added. So that's like, all of this is really, really, really powerful and gives you kind of a really cool workbench to work with when you're figuring out stuff. When you want to work with Graph, that's, I think, an amazing workbench where you can break some of that stuff, because that's okay. It's really your playground. You want to play with it. You can create data, and you can do basically whatever you want to do from here. So that's Graph Explorer. I think that's kind of one of the first thing you want to look up when you start with Graph.
Well, before you go, I love to demo the code snippets, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Because, it's great to see what the API does. How do I integrate?
Right. That's a very good point. So let's say here that I want to get the root of my OneDrive, which is the query that is right now there. I can actually get the code snippets directly from here. So I get a Graph Service client, right from here, and we give you in that case, the C# code associated to that. I can give you also the JavaScript code directly from it also. That's really, really cool. Java, Objective-C, and depending on the endpoints, and that's where you see how Objective-C is chatty as a language.
It was a weird choice of languages there to demo, but I like that we're inclusive to our mobile friends.
Yes. But a good example of something really, really cool is, let's say I'm going to go to my profile. I want to see the code for my profile. Other areas that we have is actually seeing the toolkit components. And the toolkit components is the Microsoft Graph toolkit. So we also give you a ready-made example of the MGT person currently logged in. So here you can actually see a visual representation of that data, which is really cool because now I can do this and I can actually see the user and see the live card and everything. Really powerful stuff here.
And Graph Toolkit I can use in my apps, right? Like it's just a library I can put in my own stuff, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's not just to show the content, but it's to integrate that. And in like 5 minutes, we're gonna jump into the toolkit, and you're gonna see how simple it is to add these things magically to the UI, which I think is really, really cool. We're also providing the adaptive cards, so you can actually have adaptive cards right there. So if you're doing like Teams development or you're doing Windows development that uses a lot of adaptive cards, you also get that data right there. So that's really cool. Let's say that you have friends and you want to share that query with your friends. You always have the ability to go here and share that query. So if you say, hey, I have a problem, that query does not work, you can actually copy that, give that to someone else, and automatically they will be able to test the query as part of their own Graph Explorer. So that's really cool.
There's a question from Bruce Lane. Can I use these toolkit components in React?
Yes, you can, and actually you can in whatever the language you want. So either you build the wrapper if you're using one of these really kind of weird frameworks out there. But if you want to do Vue, you want to do Angular, you want to do React, we have you covered. And if you want to do just HTML, plain HTML, we even have you covered there. So everything works super nicely on any
plain HTML. What is this, like 2005?
I'm gonna show you what plain HTML is.
I'm joking. It's just like the state of the web.
Is there a Graph Toolkit component for generating QR codes for my Apple Card, or?
That's a good question. Honestly, that would be very, very few number of lines of code, and we would be able to get there. So
I am a little sad. I went to Bing and searched for QR code generator, and there's one built into Bing now. So.
Probably it's you, JP, that have not moved on with the times rather than us using QR.
So JP, you have a challenge now. You need to figure out who's the person, who's the PM of that, and bring him to the show, and really talk about it.
With Bill and I.
I'd like to know what the executive sponsorship was at the QR level for this.
At the QR level. Cool. So that's Graph Explorer. And I want to shift gears a little bit, go into code. Now we did a little bit of like HTTP requests, but I want to go into code a little bit. The key for MGT or the Microsoft Graph Toolkit is aka.ms/MGT. What a surprise here, right? And you're going to land on our GitHub repo that we have, where we have all the getting started and all of that. So now we're on version 2.0.1, last pushed on the 17th of December, and there's all the different elements here. So we have, as a package, so you can actually pick and choose which packages you want. For the React developers, there's a specific package built for React. There's also identity providers for SharePoint, for Teams, for MSAL. So basically, you're going to see it's really kind of almost feels like a drag and drop type of development, like how easy it is. It's super easy. The first thing you want to do, the team is using Storybook as the way to document a lot of their components. So if I go into the playground, which is mgt.dev, you're going to see here on the left all the different components we have and how what they look like and what's their HTML code basically here. So if I go here, we have the MGT agenda, which is a simple agenda based on your, for example, Exchange calendar or Outlook calendar. We have the MGT login, which is the component that enables you to log into a system. MGT people, which is, we have a lot of that in Microsoft, kind of all these pills of people, a stack of people to show, I don't know, shared items or these kind of things. People picker, to search for someone. So I go here, I can go for search for Megan, and I can select Megan here. We have the MGT person, which is basically the image of the person. We already saw this component a little bit earlier.
Sebastien, can you zoom in a little bit?
Oh, so yes, I can definitely zoom in.
I'm the voice of old people. Saying,
That's
zoom
okay.
In. I can't see. Old eyes.
So here we have like the people card that is here. You can see all the data, like org chart. Who doesn't like a good org chart? And to see who people are connected to. Then afterwards, we have the tasks where we connect to both To-Do and Planner as part of Microsoft Graph. We have a Teams channel picker, and we have finally the MGT To-Do, which is a specific task component, but just for To-Do. So all of these components are all open source. There's a lot of work happening in that space. We also have, like, I would call it this, I don't know, the superhero of components here, which is our MGT get. What is our MGT get? Well, basically here, it's just a component that does a get to whatever resource in Graph, and you can templatize it. So if you're like super lazy, you don't want to like code crazy stuff, you just want to do a small get to one of the resources in Graph and template it and display it on the screen. Well, you actually have the ability to do that by using that MGT get and specifying which resource, which version of Graph, and everything. That's really, really cool because it basically enables you to utilize the Graph toolkit as the foundation to build upon. And Graph toolkit will manage all your authentication. Will manage all of the all of the 429s. If you're really, really heavy on Graph, it's going to automatically back up for you. It's going to do all the caching for you. Everything will be handled by you. The only thing you have to do, find the right endpoint, templatize it, and then we're good to go. So that's super, 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 super helpful. Now, how do we create something like that? Well, we go into Visual Studio, and yes, we will be creating an amazing
code.
Yes, that's what I said. I said Visual Studio?
You did?
Oh, man.
Let's not confuse
Visual Studio Heavy, not Visual Studio Diesel, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's already open, so clearly it wasn't Visual Studio, right?
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I don't know what I've done to deserve this attack this morning. I only did some awful PowerPoints, you know?
So, quite easy to get you started. The first thing you're going to want to do is to include MGT as part of your page. If you want to, you can do it the proper way, meaning you can add the npm package. You can do that in a strongly typed fashion. But here, I just want to show you how easy it is to actually get started. So, first thing we'll want to do is to add that MGT loader.js, which is provided by the team. That's going to bring you all the packages from MGT straight into your application. So you're going to get all the JavaScript you need. Then afterwards, you're going to use one of the components that is kind of one of the base components we want to use with MGT, which is the MGT MSAL provider, where it's going to manage for you all the authentication and all of that. So basically here, you just put in the client ID you want to use. So basically your Azure AD app that you created, and what's the scopes that you want to focus on. So I want to get a user.read consent the first time that I actually log into this. And to be able to log in, well, you're just going to need to log in via using the MGT login component. Let's hit save on that.
Question for you.
Yes.
So if I'm building an app, right?
Yeah.
I've got my own APIs that I need to call, and I've got other stuff I got to do, right? Or it's like I want to enrich my app with Graph. I want to show rich people cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That MSAL provider, like, can I provide an MSAL for it, or can I get an MSAL out of it so that I can say go get tokens for my own APIs and stuff?
Absolutely, yes. So basically, under the cover, you have the full client. You have the full MSAL client from there. Okay,
cool.
So in code, you can actually go above and beyond. Do I have a sample of that? I can show you a little bit later. But yeah, you definitely have a sample for that.
Okay, cool.
And there's also a proxy in there as well if you had to go like through some kind of custom middleware. So like it is fully customizable, extensible. Like if you want to do styling, we support that. If you want to do again like that custom middleware, the proxy, we support that. If you want to do the custom queries from Microsoft Graph, MGT Git for that. So they've had a very open mind from the very beginning of how can we make this like as dead simple as easy as possible to get up and running in like 1 or 2 lines. But if you really want to crack the hood and really get your hands dirty, we also support that as well.
Yeah. If you want to also manage your own API calls to Graph, like if you want to have that in-between API that you call in and do the on behalf of, there's also it's all in the docs. You can find all of that. So especially here to like not necessarily require a login component where you can automatically pass in the authentication there. It's also possible.
So there's one. We have one quick question from GA Crow, who asks if I want to filter in these components, right? So like if I want to like filter on, and then I think there's a second question here that I'm going to imply, which is. What if I want to connect to the B2C graph? Can I use these components with that sort of thing?
Well, yes, because basically Graph you could provide that's a good question actually.
Well, the one caveat's going to be there that when you are in a B2C tenant, there are only specific entities that you can query with Microsoft Graph. So I believe it's limited to just like the identity resources, like user and the really like group kind of objects. I don't think you can go and get like, what's my mail? What's my tasks? What's my events?
Right, because you wouldn't have any of those anyway, right?
Right, because you're not part of like the source tenant. You're just that little guest kind of user in there.
Yeah. Okay. But you can do filtering, so we could put an OData filter or something on that component to say filter by an attribute or whatever.
Yeah, if you want to have a custom query, and I know some of them actually have like strongly typed, probably not the right term, but basically a property that you can use for filtering. So like the file picker is one example. Like they'll actually show you, hey, where do you want to pull from? Is it from a SharePoint site? Is it from your OneDrive? Is it from like recently accessed files? And so they've got a couple of those kind of quick link properties that are already in there. But if you want to, again, like fully crack it open and say, hey, here's my custom query, you can go and do that too.
And we're gonna do a demo using like the MGT Get and see how we can actually filter stuff around and based on the users and all of that. I think that will be super useful. So let me go live. I'm using live server of VS Code because, as I said, I'm a very poor developer here, and I'm not hooking up everything I should. But here, just to give you an example, I have my nice sign-in experience. Let me zoom in. Maybe not that much, but and automatically I'm gonna get. Oh yeah. I don't want to provide this here. Actually, I might have one to provide. Oh, wait a second. I'm not in the right browser. That's why. How many times do you need to change browser in a day?
You didn't sacrifice enough to the demo, guys.
That's insane. Let me sign out just so we can actually see the effect.
Hey, while you're doing that, we've got one more question about things like Oasis interop. Like, so I know there's like the OData metadata endpoint that we can get all the entity schemas for in Graph.
Yeah.
Can we? Is that only going to be OData JSON? Can we get that in XML? Is there an XSD or anything that's published for Graph? I haven't seen one, but
no. Right now it's only through so basically as part of like for Graph Explorer you can actually do like v1 metadata.
Yep.
And that's
there are a handful of endpoints on the beta version of Microsoft Graph that do support other return types. So like if you're going against a reporting API, some of them do support CSV, XML, and I think there's one other one out there as well. But for the vast majority of cases, it's usually JSON.
So actually, what you get out of the metadata, you actually get the the graph is represented like this. It's not necessarily represented as a node, like as a what's that name?
No, that's
API.
Good. No, that's good.
You would get that.
Yeah, graph has CSDL. I think is what the
underlying. Yeah. So
well,
it's big, by the way. It's definitely a big.
That's
surface.
An understatement. From a true scale perspective, Microsoft Graph, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest REST API, like anywhere. Just in terms of sheer number of resources, entities, properties, like the scale of it, I think it is literally the largest one on the internet.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is actually crazy. So let's do the demo again, and this time it's gonna work. So I'm gonna sign in. I'm gonna use my account here. I'm gonna put in my password, and I'm gonna say yes. And if I did not consent to any of the scopes that I was requesting, I would get a consent screen here. And there you go. You see my face and my name. And if I click on this, I can actually
four lines of code, right? I mean, it didn't take much to do.
Not even. Like
not
it's
even.
like actually five.
Is HTML codes?
So is that really code? So zero line
angle brackets. Come on.
I'm not getting that conversation right now. I don't want to alienate half our audience, but let's say with 4 lines of text, you can get it.
Text. There we go.
Text.
Exactly. And then from there, you can actually do pretty much whatever you want. So you can do, I don't know, you want to do a MGT. Let me get that here. Like you want to see what's your user whatsoever. Like you can just do like an MGT like this. Like I want to get the user ID, or actually do instead of do that, I can do query equals /me, and automatically it's gonna bring yourself as an MGT person, and that should actually work. You know how it is when you actually don't even look at the docs and you decide that it's query /me. Let me go here. I'm gonna use that great guy here. I'm gonna go to the person and person query equals. And that's the
and while Sebastian's trying to find the solution, can somebody provide a good explanation why MS Graph is not GraphQL? Because before I joined the team, before I joined Identity, and I hadn't used Graph before, it was always like a confusion, like is GraphQL anything to do with MS Graph or whatever? It's definitely not, right? But
yeah, I was just starting to type that actually into the chat on here. It's not GraphQL in the sense that like I can go and query like 15 different sources and merge that all back together and present to you here is the response to this. It is more of a like transactional REST API, but we did mention a little bit earlier in the stream, if folks weren't on, think of it kind of like a gateway. So, within Microsoft 365, we've got a whole bunch of different services, a whole bunch of different data points you might want to access. Rather than going against, each one of those different services individually, now you've got one gate to be able to send one request to graph.microsoft.com, and we'll figure out all the, hey, what's the underlying actual REST API that we're going against, or what's the underlying other different kind of services and endpoints that we're calling into. So it's kind of GraphQL-ish, but it's really more of a gateway for multiple REST APIs behind the scenes.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so now just have this, and automatically got all my requests all built directly by Graph. Now I have a 5th line of code. Yes, I want to accept this permission. And I have another line of code. I can see all my files. I can see all my emails. I can see basically a lot of the data that lives in there. So this is one of the, I would say, from a easy integration in a third-party app, this is a really, really rich one. And if you want, I can actually request for presence right here and automatically being hooked up to Microsoft Teams. So if I'm available, it's going to show green. If it's not, it's going to show red or unavailable like it is right now. So one of the, I would say, richer experience is definitely that one. I really, really love this component. And like, as I said, basically this is what it is. So super
one of the things to kind of tack on to what Seb's saying is the experience you get with MGT. This is almost part and parcel of what we offer from first-party products. So when you go and see like that hover card, when you go and see the profile picture, when you go and see the like what else can I go and access, like these are all the things that we're using to build our products. So we're essentially making that available for third-party developers. If you want your application to look and feel just like the rest of Microsoft 365, like this is a great way to, hey, I don't need to worry about the CSS or the sizing or the like all the other kind of components. Like we're essentially giving you that. So now it's, hey, what do you actually want to build with it now? So instead of the, man, I got to figure out all the plumbing, I got to figure out all the, behind the scenes like CSS and whatnot. Instead, it's no, focus on like the business value, focus on the actual thing you want to deliver versus all that other kind of minutia stuff.
Yep. I can go and build the next office then. Ha!
Open office, here we come.
Exactly. And maybe just as one last symbol I want to showcase in MGT, which is kind of the most advanced, and here we're going to add a lot of code, like 15 lines of code. Just to give you an example of how we can leverage a custom component. So let's say here we have our MGT get that is planned on my /me/manager, but here I could do /user/ whatever ID I want to put in there, and it's going to automatically access that user. As you can see here, we can even templatize this. So when I have /me/user/manager, it's going to get the users from that manager field and then issue another request to Graph to get what's trending around this user, for example.
Nice. I like how you can inline the scopes in there as well.
Yeah. Great. So if the scopes is not consented yet, then you're going to get a consent. So it's really kind of like that's our dynamic scoping we have. So automatically when we need the scope, you're going to get prompted to accept it. You can also see that we have cache enabled. So automatically this request will only be used once for the next, I think it's 10 minutes. And that is also fully customizable. So you can say, I want to keep it for 20, 30, an hour, because it's never going to change. So that way you don't like always go back and forth with Graph. And you can also do multiple, like you can nest these components. So as part of the display template that I have here, I can do another one and see that happening here. And when I save this file and go back to my code, well, now I can see that, hello, your manager is Megan Bowen, with that full experience of the card on that user. And here all the links to the files that are trending around this user because it is your manager and you have access to these files. So in just a couple of lines of HTML, yes, it's HTML. I don't know if it's real code, but at least it's really, really useful. And we have all the wrappers for that on React and everything. We have all documentation on how to use it. So if you want to bring it to a React app, you can actually do this automatically. So that's really, really cool. And I think it's an easy way to get started with Microsoft Graph and the toolkit in that case.
Sweet.
That's it. That's what I wanted to show.
Awesome.
Look how beautiful this app is after 40 minutes of coding.
So we can tell which part is toolkit and which part is the part that you just wrote, right?
That's true.
No.
I got one request for you, Seb. Though, can we change that font?
I was
screaming for Comic Sans or something like that.
You guys don't do that to Megan. I don't know if Megan Bowen is a real person, but I will go to my grave remembering her name because she shows up in literally every test tenant and graph demo and everything. So, and apparently she manages 2/3 of the world.
Fun fact of the day: every single sample username that you see from a Microsoft Graph official demo, those are actual Microsoft employees that have consented to use their names within our demos.
So she could be managing half of Microsoft. We don't know it.
Yeah, so she could be managing the vast majority of us.
Yeah, so if you ever meet Garth Ford or Adele Vance or Megan Bowen or Alex, who's at Wilbur, like these are all like actual people that we had to get their approvals, like use their name. And we have a database somewhere of like here's the 200 names that you're allowed to use because it came from like that whole process. So
interesting.
That's
fun
an achievement. You put that in your Connect.
It's going in my Connect.
I made it into the demo list.
The Graph celebrity.
I love
now
it.
Just
Let's
for you.
freeze this pain forever.
Let's do that. Let's make this.
That's
a
going to be your
moment to
new
remember.
what's it, the thumbnail for your show video.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely going in the highlights.
I'm not feeling. I'm not feeling like I think we're failing in our inclusivity of this show right now. I didn't think that it was gonna be this soon, but I guess it's time to announce this is the last show that I'll be doing. Moving on.
The next best thing you could do is use wingdings, please.
Or emojis.
You see wingdings and you're like, oh, I can't read that. But you see this and your brain tries to parse it and it's painful the whole time. So
You have a scene here and all of a sudden,
wingdings you just ignore. So
yeah.
Fine.
There you
Let's
go.
move on.
cool.
Let's
Thank
move on.
you,
Sebastian.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's awesome.
You're welcome.
So Brian, anything you wanna show us? Anything you wanna dig into or talk about?
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to switch over to my screen, I can show you a couple things of taking some of those like code snippets that we saw in Graph Explorer, and actually show you how to leverage that inside of a couple of different areas. Because for one of the things that we hear is that's cool that I want to be able to go and query against Graph Explorer. I can use Postman. I can use a couple of different areas. But I'm actually writing code, and again, not just like the HTML angle brackets, but I'm writing C#, I'm writing JavaScript, I'm writing Java. PHP, you name it. Okay, well, I want to test this code out. I don't have to do a whole file new project or open up Eclipse or go into whatever the iOS story this is. But I want to be able to actually go and prototype my code. And there's a couple different ways that we can do this. I'll focus on the .NET story, so like with C#, but there's a lot of other platforms where you could do this. This is just kind of one sample way to do this. So from my perspective, it kind of falls into two camps. And one is, do you want to actually install something on your machine? Or do you actually want to test something in a browser where it's, hey, there's literally no installation. I could actually test this directly in that browser and get a response back as quickly as possible. So one starting point that I would mention is on our documentation site, you'll see that we've got a number of different samples, tutorials. And if I go over here to our graph docs, you can see up top, I've got resources. There's training in here. There are samples and SDKs. There's quick starts. Any of these will let you be able to actually go and use, hey, here's the language that I'm looking for. Here is the different type of platform that I'm building for, whether it's a web application or whatnot. Oops, actually, I want to go into here, getting started, actually. If you see our getting started list, I've got .NET Core, I've got Android, Angular, iOS, Java, JavaScript, Node, PHP, and so on. Wow. So if I just chose, let's say, Node.js, for example, you can see a quick start will be hey, get it running. We will provide you with a kind of pre-baked Azure AD application. It'll have all the things that you need into that in terms of a client ID, a client secret, and so forth. You'll actually download a zip and be able to open that up and run it from your machine literally in like minutes. So we will actually inject into that download, here are all the things that you'll need. Again, that client ID, client secret, any kind of tenant information, and so forth. So that's a kind of quick and easy way to get up and started without having to do a whole bunch of work. If, though, you actually want to take a little bit deeper dive into this and say, hey, I want to build something from scratch and literally understand every single line of code or every kind of addition that we're making to this, we do have also a number of kind of, build from scratch things. And so you'll actually see with this, hey, we'll walk you through step by step, like, hey, file a new project, go and create files, go and add this content to it. And at the end, you'll have a fully built solution. It'll take you more than a couple of minutes, usually anywhere from like 20 to 30, but give you a little bit more deeper feel for how to actually go and build something from scratch. And lastly, there are links to go and actually grab the SDKs. So if you're working with Angular or .NET or Java, JavaScript, and so forth, we do have SDKs to give you a little bit more experience with, hey, I actually want to go in and grab users, I want to go and grab events, but it'll handle a lot of things for you. So when it comes time for, I need to do retry logic, I need to do error handling, I need to do any other kind of aspects with that actual plumbing code, you can actually use that for the SDKs to help you with that. Now, from my perspective, great, I've got the language of choice, I've got the framework, I've got the whatever else I'm looking for. How do I actually go and test out that code that I have? Now, one tool that I've used personally, this is something that's available for .NET. I don't believe it's going to be supported for JavaScript and some other languages. Something called LinkPad. I first heard about this, I don't know, maybe a decade or more ago. And the idea is that I can actually go and write a C# or an F#, multiple other kind of languages. I can write a program, and not have to worry about doing file new project or building a console app or building a website. I literally just want to focus on, here's the code that I'm going to write. So I'll show you kind of the end result, and then we'll rewind it back and show you kind of where it started from. But right here, this is all the code that I need to specify to actually make my query to Microsoft Graph work. So if I go ahead and hit the run button on this, you'll see that down here in the bottom, I've got my results for this. We'll zoom that in just a bit. So here's my result, and I'm pulling back in this case. I've got a graph client, I'm going into users. So literally just grab me all the users, grab me the first result off of that, and show me the display name. And then this dump command is basically what LinkPad uses to say, hey, show this actually into the little output window, and I'm going to label it graph result. So literally these 2 lines of code is all it took me to actually go and make my query. I'm using MSAL, so again for my authentication. I'm using the .NET Graph SDK for this, and I'm able to go and make my query in this kind of simple lines of code. Now, where did all this code come from? I put into the chat window just a second ago something I've produced myself, which is the .NET Core console sample. And so we take a look over at here. This was something that was part of the 30 Days of Graph blog series that I helped host a couple of years back. And we actually provided a .NET Core console sample to actually go and be able to make queries against Microsoft Graph. And it's broken down in a couple of different areas. You'll see that there's a base console app on here. This is literally the bare bones. I want to go and make literally a simple request to go and get that user again on there. And it gives you all the plumbing, all the different files and things that are necessary for it. So what essentially I did was I took that code that's inside of the program.js and some of the helper files, and I essentially dumped those into here inside of this LinkPad query. So when it comes time for newing up a new auth client, when it comes time for going and getting the auth provider, going and getting the MSAL context, and some other things, essentially that's all the code that I put into here. So now, if I want to go and query something else inside of my tenant, I can do graph, oops, get our IntelliSense working here. Oh, come on, machine, you can catch up. There we go. Graph client dot, and you'll see all these different entities that are available to me if I want to go and talk to the applications within my tenant, the chats, if I want to go and look at devices, I want to take a look at drives for OneDrive, groups, and so forth. So all these things, I can kind of do some quick prototyping, and I can actually validate that, hey, the thing that I'm trying to go against, can I get back a result? Is it the thing that I expect? Do I need to do any formatting? So really kind of a quick and easy way to actually be able to test that code out, get back a response, and now, when it comes time for actually writing this into my actual application, I've actually tested things out, I know that they're going to work, and people have found a quicker experience with that. So the default thing that I'm working on here, this is using what we call application permissions. So there is no user context for this. This is literally a background service. This is some kind of disconnected application. Again, there's no real interactivity to it. It's really going to be something that's running on the back end for this. So great for things where I'm doing like auditing, or I want to go and take a look at, hey, for this user, I want to go and do some things on their behalf. So really, there's no user context with this. If you do want something where there's a user context, there's a separate one in here, which is using delegated permissions. And again, the idea here is that I actually do have a user context. Like someone's logging into a website, they're going into a mobile application, they're going into some other kind of scenario where, hey, I as the user am making this request against Microsoft Graph. And so for this, we actually use something called the device code flow. And if you've ever used, let's say, Netflix on your Roku device, or you've logged into some kind of application on your phone, rather than popping up the browser and actually logging in, instead, we're going to send you a notification that says, hey, type in this little password, this little kind of code that we're going to send to you. Type that into your browser and log in as your user. Once you do that, now we recognize that, hey, that little local instance of a authentication request, we're going to tie it back to you, the user, and we're going to basically kind of connect the dots there so that me as Brian, I've actually logged into my Netflix account, into my Facebook account, into Twitter, or whatever else, and now I can make requests on your behalf using that little connection that we just made on there. So here, if I go ahead and hit the run on this, you'll notice down at the bottom, blow us up a little bit, I can go to this page on here, Microsoft.com/device login, punch in this little code, and I'll go ahead and grab this. I'll go over to my demo browser. So frequently, I literally have it as a favorite up on my favorites bar. So go into device code. I will punch in my code for that, hit next. And because I'm authenticated as my user, I can prompt hey, logging in as what's your username and password. Instead, hey, I've already got my logged in user. They're already signed into here. And here is the application that we're using to actually log that in. And in a second, we'll actually show you that back in Azure AD. But I'm going to log in as my mod administrator account. I've done all the consent. I've already done all the other kind of prerequisites. So essentially now I'm logged into that session in LinkPad as my mod administrator account in my demo tenant. So when I go back to here, you'll see that, hey, great, we did the authentication prompt. And now I'm getting back those same kind of results. But in this case, it's me, the user, making the request, not some kind of disconnected application permission out there. So great ways for us to be able to kind of test out code. Again, LinkPad, this is a application. Really, all I did was I imported the different NuGet packages for this. So I've got the Microsoft.graph and I've got the Microsoft.identity.client. So quick and easy ways to be able to kind of test out code. And I can be able to modify this, do whatever kind of queries I need to in this sense, and issue those things back against my my demo tenant. Now, if you don't want to install things, there actually is another tool out there that I'll mention. I'll pull this up on my other monitor here. So this is something called .NET Fiddle, and the idea here is that there's a number of different Fiddle sites. You have like JS Fiddle, you'll have .NET Fiddle, and I think there's at least a half dozen or more others out there. But rather than having to install any kind of tool on my local machine, I actually could be able to run that same type of code that we had. And I'll blow this up a little bit. This is the same type of code that I had in LinkPad, but instead now here I'm actually doing it through the browser. So again, no installation, but I can still call those same NuGet packages. Got Microsoft.graph, Microsoft.identity.client, and I'm even using the latest version of .NET, .NET 5, all the latest and greatest. So in here, I can be able to do a simple run on this code. And you'll notice that in the text on here, rather than using the SDK, I'm actually going to use just a simple HTTP client and make my query out against there. But all in all, the same type of information is going to be responded to me on this. And you'll see down at the bottom, this is my JSON response from this. And if I scroll over to the section where it gives me back the value for this, this is that same type of response. And so you can see that, hey, that conference room Adams, that's the first user context essentially inside the tenant. So again, I didn't install anything on here. I literally just made my references to NuGet. I was able to actually make a query against that. And now I'm not going to have all the fanciness in terms of IntelliSense inside the browser here, but I could go and prototype my query and say, hey, what would my query look like? What kind of things can I do for filtering? And be able to do that kind of prototyping very quickly directly inside of our browser. So kind of a quick and easy low-code way to be able to go and test this out.
That's fantastic.
Now the last piece, and again, if you're looking for more of the full-featured way to do this, you could come into Visual Studio Code. And again, if I linked to that sample project earlier, if you want to go ahead and fork that and take a look at that, you'll see that we've got a number of different scenarios in here. So there's that basic console application. There's also a scenario using certificate authentication. And we see this from a lot of enterprise developers, folks who are trying to do a little bit more security-minded. Rather than pass it in a client ID and secret, instead, if you're going to require a certificate, now I can say, hey, this actually has to be the cert on the machine, whether it's the server, the client desktop, wherever else you're running from, ensuring that that user has a certificate. Now they can actually go do the auth request against the service and be able to make that request on their behalf. But all the code inside of here, I just pull up a sample on here, got my program.cs. You'll see that up top, we've got a very similar kind of syntax for I want to go out and make my query against the Graph client. I'm going to do a filter for the top. In this case, it's going to be the user's request, and we pass in those options that we defined on here separately. So if I go do a .NET build.
Can you zoom in one bit, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
You got to tell me to do the enhanced thing from CSI, though. That's the only way that I respond. Here we go. .NET run. Oh, whoops, I need to go one level deeper. It's console app. There we go. Surprised it didn't yell at me before. .NET run. It's taking longer to run the previous time. Yeah, you get the idea. Essentially, we're making the same kind of queries that we saw in LinkPad inside of the browser, and also, oh, there we go. Now we've got all results. So there's our results using the Graph SDK, and I've also got the same kind of thing happening from the HTTP request. So again, same response, same type of experience happening across all the different kind of platforms. Great way to be able to test out code and get back your responses and make sure that, hey, things actually are working the way we expect them to be. So let's shift gears just a little bit, and I want to show you something else related to browser profiles. So I know someone mentioned in the chat earlier, hey, it's great that I can go into Graph Explorer and I can go against the demo tenant, or I can go against a logged in user. What if I got multiple users? So for me personally, I've got at least 2 or 3 demo tenants that I work with on a regular basis. And it's great that I can log in as my current mod administrator, but what if I need to come in as Megan Bowen, or come in as Alex, or anyone else in the tenant? If you're not familiar with this, in Chromium engines, any of the browsers out there, so either Chrome, Microsoft Edge, I believe Brave also supports this, you can see up in the upper right, there is this little profile section. And so for here, I actually have multiple users that are all defined for essentially different tenants. And I'll see if I can do a quick zoom in on this. Not sure if this will work for the stream. Oops, that's not going to work. Essentially, I've got users for my administrator on one tenant, and then I've got my admin on another tenant. I've got Adele in tenants 1 and 2. I've got Alex in one of my tenants. I've got my personal, my work, and more users in here. So the idea is that I can actually set up these different profiles to be basically designated for a specific user, kind of a persona. So if I'm looking for, hey, here is my security administrator, here is my Azure AD administrator, here is my just end user developer kind of person, I can set up different profiles. And now when I go to the different websites for these, let's just take an example of, I go to Diego, launch Diego, all the authentication prompts, all the different kind of things, they're basically tied back to him. So if I go to Office just as Diego, because I've saved all the credentials, I've stored all the other kind of things to that user, now when I go to do sign in, it'll know that, hey, I'm in the context of Diego, I don't have to go and retype my username and things that are tied back to that. Instead, oops, no, I do not want to switch browser profiles. Oop, I forgot, this is my new machine, and I don't have actually Diego set up yet. Let's go to Adele, because I know she is set up. And of course, I'm missing all the awesome chat happening over here in the stream. There you go. So I'm already logged in as Adele. No need for prompts on this. Essentially, you can say, hey, save all my credentials, save all my different things I need for this user. And you can even set things like the home pages. What do you actually want to show up for this user when you first launch them? So if I go into Manage Profile Settings, and there's a section on here for On Startup, you can see what pages should open up for this current user. So I can say, hey, use all the currently open tabs, or you can go and specify those for that user. So if I take a look at my administrator, you'll see that they got a different set of startup pages. In this case, I want to go to something like the Azure AD portal. I want to go to the SharePoint portal, and maybe to some other kind of location. So again, for this user, I've got these predefined things because I know that when I log in with this user, I always want to go to these 3 locations. So a great way for me to be able to test things out, again, as different users in different tenants with different kinds of pre-configured pages to go to. Just kind of gets me into my flow, and I'm able to quickly and easily do things like that.
Something really cool about that is, especially when I'm using Graph Explorer actually saves your history of all the calls you make. So when you have multiple accounts, then you're totally lost usually. But here, you keep all of those, and when I use Megan, it's because I'm using Megan for scenario A, B, and C, and then I can just go back and relaunch all of these Graph Explorer history, and it makes it extremely simple to go back and be productive. So that's really cool.
Yep, as you can see here, like I've got old 200 requests or 400 or 500 or whatnot. I can go back and actually reissue those queries and be able to run them and see, hey, what was the result that I had with that? So great call out for, again, being able to separate kind of duties of who's calling what and how can I be able to use those users. So those are all kind of the aspects that I wanted to show you guys. Again, being able to use the SDKs, be able to use the quick starts, and also kind of prototype code directly in things like LinkPad or in the browser with some of the fiddle sites, or also in Visual Studio Code if you want to run things locally as well.
Cool.
That's awesome. Maybe one question for you, Brian, and because I know that like that was very HTML and .NET centric, but we have SDKs for a bunch of other languages, right?
Correct. So if you go back to the kind of getting started on here, the majority of the languages you'll see on here, these do have SDKs that are going to be available. So if I go into something like .NET Core, you'll see that we'll have an SDK for that. Same thing for Node, for Java, JavaScript. The majority of our major languages, they do have an associated SDK. So feel free to go and test those things out, be able to kind of play around with them, and kind of use that inside your applications.
And everything is developed in the open. So if you want to send in a PR because you believe you do something, you want to add something to the SDKs or whatsoever, everything is in the Microsoft Graph repo, so you can actually go and chit chat with the engineers or submit your own PR in there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I see someone mentioned in the previously in the chat about like how do I submit issues or any other kind of suggestions for this. If you do go to any of the repos for our SDKs, so if you go into github.com/Microsoft Graph, you should be able to search in here for the repositories. Just do SDK. And you'll see that we've got a number of them on here. So here's JavaScript, .NET, PHP, Java, PowerShell. Oh, there's more Ruby, Android, and more. So you can actually go into those specific repos, be able to open up issues, submit PR pull requests if you'd like to as well. Really, it is all out there, open source, available for folks to go in and be able to kind of jump in on what we're developing and provide your voice back to us.
Great. Hey, I have a question, especially since I'm fairly new to both Identity and Graph. There used to be this kind of a fork in terms of identifying and acquiring tokens for Graph. I think the story is becoming better. Like if I had an MSAL token, I couldn't pass it in to begin with. I had to instantiate an identity provider for Graph specifically. That is being fixed as we go forward, right? Like we have a more cohesive story where I can sign in a user using MSAL.NET or MSAL.js and then take that token and go and query Graph, whether directly via an HTTP call or instantiating the Graph client for my language of choice, correct?
That's right. So we have in a number of our samples, they'll actually show you like, here is the query that you'll make against MSAL, and here's how you go and get the access token that's already going to be pre-authenticated to Microsoft Graph. One thing that is going to be changing in the future, we started to kind of prototype something called Microsoft.graph.auth. The idea being that, hey, I want to make it even simpler. So if it kind of like you saw in the MGT, if I just specify literally the client ID and maybe the tenant that I'm going to go against, I can actually go and write all the code that I want to go and do that authentication. And as we started to talk to other teams that were doing similar kind of things, specifically the Azure team, we realized that they actually have an Azure.identity. And as part of that, that was like their model for doing a integrated authentication story. So we're actually hooking into that same type of provider that they're going to be producing. And in the future, you'll see that, hey, when I go and do my authentication request, whether it's to Azure, whether it's to Azure AD, whether it's to Microsoft Graph, there's literally going to be one way to do that, and we're all sharing the same type of goodness. So if you're using managed identity, if you're doing client ID and secret, if you're doing certificate, if you're doing managed identities, all across the platform, we're looking to have support where it's literally uniform across all the different ways that we authenticate and all the services we go against. So that's definitely something that we're working towards. I don't believe we're there today, but that is very top of mind with all the folks on our side who are building those things out.
So,
That's
question
fantastic.
for both of you: what are the
42.
what's like one? Hold on,
You
I
win.
haven't
Ding,
asked
ding,
yet.
ding, 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 ding.
Okay, so what's the thing you're most one thing you're most excited about that's coming up that you can actually tell us about in Graph?
Ooh, that we can tell you about. That's the key point right there.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
I think there's one that just showed up 1 week or 2 weeks ago in the roadmap, in the Microsoft 365 roadmap that is available on roadmap.microsoft.com. I don't even know what's the URL. Let me figure that out. But it's the fact. So a lot of the our developers are working a lot with files and sites from a SharePoint standpoint, and now we have what we would call the selected site or the resource specific consent based on SharePoint sites. So basically apps can only access a specific site and not the entire tenant. And that was one of the most requested feature we've ever had on Graph, and it's starting to roll out very, very soon. It's aimed at the end of this month. So that is very exciting for a huge part of our audience that works on Graph. That's
So
gonna be
that
really cool.
so that means that instead of like the files.read.all or files.read permission for a user, right? I could scope that to just a single site that user can read, not every site that they can read, right?
Yeah. So right now it's going to be it's called site that's selected,
Okay.
and it's basically so you basically need to assign your app a permission to that site, and this app now just has access to the site you're connected to. It cannot go and expand on other things. So especially when you're working with ISVs and everything, sometimes you want to maybe protect some areas of your data and state or whatsoever. So now it can be extremely specific, very similar to how Teams has done it from a delegated standpoint, where when you are in a team, you have access to that team data, but nothing else with their resource-specific consent. Now that site that's selected in SharePoint is kind of a similar approach. Right now, it's only on the application-only side. So it's really meant for like background processing of data,
Okay.
but they're looking at delegated scenarios in the future. But right now, that's a huge request from a lot of our partners.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I think Exchange had something similar. It wasn't a graph thing, but it was, an application that can read a mailbox, and the only permission was to read all mailboxes, but you can still restrict it Exchange side to a single one. That's cool. All right, Brian.
Exactly.
What about you?
I would say this is probably not as glamorous of a topic, but I would say that we at Microsoft, and especially our executives, are really looking at kind of API completeness, and also the API first approach to a lot of the products that we're building. And so in the past, you may have seen that, hey, new product comes out and it's got its own API. Again, it's its own authentication scheme, it's its own way to do things, its own SDK. So really, like, that led to a lot of fragmentation. And now that we're moving forward more with, Microsoft Graph first, so now it's like, hey, we've got a new service that's coming up, and Microsoft Teams is a great example of this. There is no quote-unquote legacy API for Microsoft Teams. It is Graph first. So when we start to roll out these new applications, new services, Microsoft To Do also, they're only using Microsoft Graph for their API. So what you're seeing is that really across the board, and again, we're multiple silos inside Microsoft. It may not appear that way, but again, it is kind of the different areas of reporting trees. We're starting to get to the point where, hey, anytime something's going to come out, it has to be Graph first. It has to support, again, like all the different use cases and scenarios that we're seeing. So not only like feature completeness, but also like that API first mentality that is really starting to ring true. And we're seeing more and more, executive buy-in, which then, trickles all the way down to all the teams who are actually building the APIs, who are actually building the services. And so you're going to see a lot more of that coming, especially at Build this year. And there's even more motivation for internal teams to get on the bandwagon and start to develop together to produce this unified API together.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. No, I think that's huge. I mean, in identity, we've had a lot of discussions about API first and what does that mean, and how do you deliver it? Because I mean, inevitably, the first question everybody asks when we demo something, we talk about a solution is, cool. All right, I've got to automate this. I have no access to this environment. Only my build servers do. What am I going to do? And then it's like, well, so I think like as a cultural shift, it's a huge benefit both for us as developers who build things with it, but also for all of our customers who are in all sorts of different scenarios and have all different types of restrictions and deployment pipelines and build. I mean, just everything is different from place to place. That at least the API can be the lowest common denominator. That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, is there anything else you need to share? We're getting close to the hour, so we're all gonna have to get on out of here, I guess. But anything else before we wrap up?
Like just play around. Just go Graph Explorer, AKMS/GE, and just start hacking your way to Graph. And love to get your feedback. Love to know how that fits into your scenarios. But from a sharing perspective, it's basically now we want to learn from the community. We want to learn how people are using Graph to build their own apps, and that's definitely what we're here for.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you, fellas.
Before we go, make sure to send us your stories. Make sure to join Discord. Reach out to us if you have any questions. And we look forward to seeing you next week with a slight change of schedule and more changes coming to the stream, exciting changes for us. So we look forward to everyone. Have a lovely weekend.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this time with you guys. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
well, you'll be coming back, so more exciting news from the Graph team as well.
You get to look at our ugly mugs again. So.
Oh, you're getting your mugs.
To look
You're
too
getting
close.
your mugs.
Speaking of ugly mugs, we've got a couple.
Faces, not mugs. Yeah.
Oh.
Ah.
Oh, well, okay, cool. Well, anyway, so yeah, we'll be back on Tuesday. Send us an email, 45show@microsoft.com. Join the Discord, which is the link is up there at the top of the screen. Follow Brian and Sebastien and bug them with all of your graph questions, and maybe you can bribe them to get a new API added. And we will see everybody on Tuesday. Have a great weekend, and thanks for coming with us. See ya.